You've probably heard the line, in nature, the sick get left behind. The weak get abandoned. Survival of the fittest and the rest just don't survive. That's the story. It's also, it turns out, almost completely wrong. Because 1.5 million years ago, something happened that nature was never supposed to allow. A human being who could not walk, could not hunt, could not even feed himself, lived for years. Someone chose to keep him alive. Now, sit with that for a second, because it doesn't make sense. Not by the rules we've been taught. So, when exactly did our ancestors stop treating the sick as a liability and start treating them as family? To answer that, we don't start with doctors. We don't start with medicine or hospitals or even language. We start on a quiet hillside in the country of Georgia, called Dmanisi, 1.77 million years ago. This is before Homo sapiens, before controlled fire, before almost everything you'd associate with being human. And buried there, archaeologists found a skull with almost no teeth left in it, not missing from decay after death. Gone years before he died, the bone healed smooth around the empty sockets. Here's the part that should actually unsettle you. Losing your teeth in that world isn't an inconvenience. It's a death sentence. No chewing means no meat, no tough plants, none of the calorie-dense food that kept early hominins alive. Any other primate in that condition is dead within a month. There's no scenario where he managed alone. Somebody softened his food, chewed it for him probably, did this every single day for years for a person contributing nothing measurable back to the group. That's not instinct twitching on autopilot. That's a choice, repeated daily, by people with every logical reason to stop making it. And the deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. In France, at a site called La Chapelle-aux-Saints, researchers found an elderly Neanderthal whose skeleton reads like a diagnosis. Crippling arthritis through the spine and hips. Almost every tooth gone, the jaw reabsorbed around the gaps in a way that only happens after years of healing. This was a man in near constant pain, barely able to move, functionally incapable of hunting for a long stretch before he died. And he still reached what counted, for a Neanderthal, as old age. Then there's the case that tends to actually get people. A Neanderthal skeleton pulled from a cave in modern-day Iraq. One arm withered and essentially useless since childhood. Multiple healed fractures scattered through the skeleton. Proof of trauma survived. Not just endured. Almost certainly blind in one eye. Every rule of prehistoric survival says this man dies young, dies fast, dies alone. He didn't. The bones show decades. Decades of being fed. Decades of being kept warm and protected by people who got nothing quantifiable in return. Notice the number that keeps repeating. Not days, not weeks, decades, across 3 separate sites, 3 separate eras, in some cases 3 entirely different species of human. That's not a fluke showing up in the data. That's a pattern, and a pattern that consistent means behavior, not accident. It's not only the fossils saying this either. Researchers studying present-day hunter-gatherer groups, our closest living approximation of ancient social structure, find the exact same behavior happening right now. Injured or sick members get fed first, moved first, protected first, frequently at real cost to the whole group's food supply and mobility. This isn't rare generosity. It's an expectation baked in so deep across cultures with zero contact with each other that it stops looking like culture and starts looking like biology. Picture it like a night nurse who never clocks out, showing up for a patient who can never pay the bill. Except there was no shift, no wage, no title. Just people deciding day after day that this was simply what got done. So let's actually kill the myth because it's earned it. The picture of prehistoric life as one long brutal contest, where the weak simply vanish quietly into the grass while the strong move on. That image comes from a lazy, flattened reading of evolution, the kind you get from a bad documentary narrator. The real evolutionary logic runs the opposite direction. Humans are cooperative breeders, cooperative survivors, built around the group rather than the individual, and a group that protects its sick, its injured, its elderly, isn't burning resources for nothing. It's protecting its most valuable asset, because the ones who've survived the longest are the ones holding the memory. Which plants heal? Which ones kill? Where the water is when the rivers run dry? Keeping them alive keeps that knowledge alive. Care wasn't sentiment, Care was survival infrastructure. But here's what the cold logic can't fully cover. Feeding an elder who remembers where the water is, sure, that math checks out. But hauling a man with a dead arm and one working eye through decades of his life, long after any reasonable group stopped expecting anything back from him? The spreadsheet stops explaining that. Somewhere in there, the calculation runs dry and something else takes its place. Something that looks, whether we're comfortable saying it or not, like love. Not the romantic kind. The older, heavier kind. The kind that shows up as someone chewing your dinner for you because you physically can't. The kind that never once asks what you're worth before deciding to keep you. And that matters enormously, because it means empathy isn't some recent upgrade running on ancient wiring. It wasn't invented once we had leisure time and surplus grain to spare. The wiring and the impulse arrived together, as one thing. Long before agriculture, long before villages, long before we had a single word for any of it, we were already doing it, quietly, generation after generation, on hillsides and in caves, leaving no record except bone healed in places it had absolutely no business healing. There's an old idea, repeated often in anthropology circles, that the first true sign of civilization isn't a tool or a weapon, it's a healed femur. Because in the wild, a broken leg means death, and a leg that mended means somebody stayed close enough, long enough to make sure it did. Whatever the exact origin of that idea, the fossils keep backing it up anyway. Civilization didn't begin with fire, or farming, or the written word. It began the moment someone chose to stay when leaving cost nothing. Think again about that arm, withered since childhood. Decades of meals brought by hands that had every reason to walk away and simply didn't. Decades of somebody deciding, with no word for kindness and no framework for ethics, using only whatever ancient pull was already sitting inside them, that this one life was worth the trouble. You've heard that in nature, the sick get left behind. Somewhere near the very start of what makes us human, somebody looked directly at the sick, the broken, the completely unproductive, and stayed anyway. That decision, made in the cold, for absolutely nothing in return, might be the oldest thing we can actually prove about ourselves. So here's what I want you to carry with you. Next time somebody brings you soup while you're sick, or sits beside you in a waiting room, or does something for you that costs them and gives them nothing measurable back, you're not watching a modern habit. You're watching something that survived 1.5 million years intact, handed down without a single break in the chain from that toothless man on a hillside in Georgia straight through to you. Would you have stayed? Tell me in the comments.